Hello, welcome to another episode of Varsity360. I'm Columbian sports editor Micah Rice, joined this week by Will Denner. Will, fresh back from Hawaii, where you got to spend a birthday with your girlfriend, so you looked rested and ready for the home stretch that we're now entering of the high school football season.
And hopefully a little tan as well.
Yeah, something I've never been able to do. But anyway, we're coming to you again from the First Pacific Financial Studio in downtown Vancouver. Thanks again to First Pacific Financial for their support of the show, for supporting high school athletics and the community at large. And we have a fun show for you today. We are handing out our Midseason awards. Some of these you won't be surprised by. They're awards for offensive MVP, defensive MVP, coach of the year, but we also have some clever awards that are going to allow us to kind of put the first half of the 2024 high school football season into perspective and context. So I can't believe that we're over halfway done with the regular season.
I know it goes fast, but these next few weeks are going to be really fun.
All right, but it's been a lot of fun the first 5 weeks, and it's really kind of shown us, answered some of our questions, and we've seen a few teams and players emerge. So we're going to talk about them. And the first award that we've come up with is one that we're calling the Buzz Lightyear Award. Buzz Lightyear famously said, "To infinity and beyond," and this is how we are going to award our most improved player of the first half of the 2024 football season. Someone that maybe was a little under the radar or young or unpolished last year, but has really shown out here in the first half of the 2024 season. Will, who are you tabbing for your most improved player of the year?
I'm going to take Terrence Sarion, a junior at Evergreen. A player who factored into their offense last year. I think maybe they were still kind of trying to figure out where correctly to use him. He was a little bit of a wide receiver, running back hybrid, but this year I feel like he's already been a polished player, but he's fully realizing his talent. He obviously had a really strong summer that kind of made him quickly ascend up the recruiting ranks. I believe he's the number 3 ranked recruit in the class of 2026. Already has offers from the likes of Cal, Oregon, Washington, and most recently Washington State after Jake Dickert and the Washington State coaching staff were on hand at last week's game against Kelso. But really just a big play guy who is the engine of that offense right now. I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of plays against Union and North Thurston and Kelso, a guy who's always a threat to score. And really, I think just also a credit to how balanced that offense is right now. But Terrence Sarion is really the star of that offense.
Well, I got to see him firsthand against Kelso in that dramatic 42-35 win that really got the Plainsmen going hot to start the 3A Greater St. Helens League season. And he had 6 catches for 133 yards, 2 touchdowns in the first half, the quintessential big play player, and he looks the part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm going to go with a small school player for my most improved, and that is Isaac Cromie of Le Center. Last year, Isaac Cromie only had 1 game over 100 yards rushing. This season, he is averaging 153 yards a game. He had 228 yards last week in a win. He had 193 yards in week 2, and he already has 10 rushing TDs, which is 1 more rushing touchdown than he had all of last year. We're kind of used to this with Le Center, in that you know they're going to have guys all over the field. You just don't know which ones are going to emerge and become like the real playmakers. It seems like it's a group of 3 or 4 guys every year that really take on that mantle. But in the first half of 2024, Isaac Cromie has been one of those guys for the undefeated Wildcats.
Well, you see that a lot, I think, in Le Center too, where you have these guys that you've heard their names. They've kind of played more complementary roles in years past, and that's just kind of like next man up once the other player graduates. Jalen Ward was kind of their big running back for the last couple of years, and now Isaac Cromie really kind of steps into that feature role, and he's shining so far.
Yeah, and so other players we considered, certainly Landon Beaumont at Ridgefield. He was a wide receiver last year, but he's taken on the role of quarterback in that Ridgefield offense, has him off to a 5-0 start. He ranks 6th in the area in passing yardage with over 750 yards, and he's 3rd in the area with 11 passing touchdowns, so he would certainly be on the short list. Mm-hmm. But Terrence Sarion and Isaac Cromie have been the ones that, in our minds, have really stepped up their game from last year to this one.
Yep.
Our next award, we're going to call this the Jack Colletto Award. It's our version of the Paul Hornung Award for the most versatile player. If you're new to the area and haven't followed us for the past decade, Jack Colletto he led Camas to their first state title in program history as their quarterback and also their strong safety. He got a lot of offers from smaller schools to kind of be a quarterback, but he said, no, I'm a Pac-12 type of guy. Yeah. Ends up going to Oregon State, where he's like, put me anywhere, put me in quarterback, put me running back, put me at on special teams, and put me at linebacker. He ended up having a very successful career at Oregon State and actually won college football's Paul Hornung Award for best two-way player. So for our version of that, we're obviously that was a theme coming into this year, was yes. the crop of really versatile players that kind of led their team by doing a little bit of everything. We highlighted 4 of those players for our season preview that we had. But Will, who has been the one player that you think has embodied the versatility, the excellence and versatility so far?
This doesn't really come as a surprise, probably, but I'm going with Gavin Packer, Skyview. Somebody who really came into high school more as a quarterback, but quickly transitioned to receiver in addition to being an excellent defensive back and return specialist. And he kind of has to go back to quarterback in these past couple weeks after Doogie Poindexter got injured. I think he's probably the most likely player in our area to, if it came down to it, he could probably throw, catch, and rush for a touchdown in the same game. He almost did a couple weeks ago against Puyallup, but now that Doogie Poindexter has kind of re-entered the fold a little bit, I think it's best for Skyview probably to have Packer back at receiver. But even last week in the game against Decatur, he came in back at QB for a couple plays and ran some like option type run plays, and just a really versatile player all the way around, and somebody that can line up just about anywhere and make an impact on a game.
And also don't forget about his defensive presence.
Absolutely,
he's someone in that defensive backfield. I think he's in the safety spot.
He can play safety or cornerback depending on the matchup, but somebody who can make an impact on that side of the ball as well.
I remember he was the guy that recovered the fumble that was key in that comeback win over Graham Kapowson the week before. He could have had 2 kick or punt returns for touchdowns if it weren't for a couple of penalties. So obviously no surprise that he's a selection for that. I am going to go with another guy that was among the 4 on our cover, and this is Aiden Brown at Kalama. Almost 700 yards and 16 touchdowns running the ball.
Yep.
And then over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns passing the ball. And he also plays defense.
Right,
and he has Kalama off to an undefeated start heading into some pretty crucial Trico League matchups. I think we always kind of knew that Kalama would make that jump from 2B into 1A pretty seamlessly because of kind of the overall talent and leadership that someone like Aiden Brown brings, but he has been nothing short of spectacular this year.
Yeah, and I mean, the passing and rushing combination, I think, is really rare at that level when you can be your team's top rusher in addition to passing, and then some teams maybe don't want to put their quarterback on defense, but he's playing just about everywhere and playing every down. So really a testament to him and just his motor and how versatile he is as well.
Yeah, and we also considered some of the other guys we had on our preview story. You look at what Elijah Anderson is doing at Woodland, having to take over the quarterback role and having Woodland off to an undefeated start in league play after they kind of had figured some things out in the non-league season. Woodland looks the role of a contender for the 2A Greater St. Helens League title as that offense and more importantly maybe that defense come into focus. And then obviously Joe Calarami at Seton Catholic is one of those do-everything players. You look at their box scores and some of the lopsided wins that Seton Catholic has had. He's got, a 60-yard touchdown here, 60-yard receiving touchdown, and then runs for a bunch. And so, definitely someone to give a nod to as when it comes to their versatility. We had a little fun with this next award. We're calling this award the Bane of Tim Martinez Award, and this goes to our team that has been the hardest to figure out so far this year. And as you know, if you follow what we do, Tim Martinez makes his weekly picks, usually does pretty well with those picks, but some teams this year have been pretty tough to figure out. In fact, this one team, Will, that you're going to talk about, Tim is 1-4 in predicting their games this year.
Yeah, it's Prairie, a team that I have not yet seen, but just in looking at their scores and just reading and hearing about them through all of you. I mean, it's every one of their wins. They're often trailing, but to their credit, they have performed in the clutch in each one of those. Most recently, it was against Mountain View last week, a game I think they trailed by 2 touchdowns at halftime, and that was in addition to a really dramatic win over their in-district rival Battleground, and then earlier a game you saw when they beat Washougal. All 3 games that they had to come back and claw into to win. But then on the flip side, their 2 losses to Ridgefield and Dallas of Oregon have been pretty ugly blowout losses. So a team that I think everybody is still trying to figure out, and maybe they're still trying to figure out their identity as well. But I think these next few weeks in the 3A GSHL against a couple other teams, I think in similar positions to them, I think we'll know a lot more about them pretty soon. Well,
and to be fair to Prairie, they've done some really good things this first half of the year. They I think they kind of it was sort of a fluke loss in week 1, not a fluke in that I think Ridgefield was just the better team, but I think the margin of that victory ended up kind of making us say, well, first-year coach and Junior Miller, maybe they're implementing a few things, implementing some schemes, but we don't really know what to expect from Prairie. Well, they come back and, like you said, had a comeback win over Washougal in week 2, a team that we're pretty high on after they beat Mountain View and could still do some really good things. And then, so they've shown a way to win these close games. And you might ask about, well, what happened down in Oregon when they went down to Dallas and lost in a lopsided, I think 55-0 or something like that. Well, Dallas just happens to be the number 1 ranked Class 5A team in the state of Oregon. They are undefeated. And so that was a case where I think they kind of ran into a buzzsaw there. But when it comes to the Falcons, they've shown that clutch gene. And so sometimes that makes them hard to predict because it's like, we don't know which side of the close game they're going to end up on, but they've been certainly a team that will bring the entertainment value every week.
Yeah, and they're in a good spot. I mean, they won their first league game and have a tough one this week against Kelso, but they're 1-0 in league, so they've done what they need to do so far.
I'm going to go with a team for me that's been tough to predict, and that's been Heritage, and I say that in a good way because in past years, obviously we've talked about that Heritage entered this season on a 20-game losing streak, and so you could always kind of predict like, we know kind of how it's going to go with Heritage. Mm-hmm. Well, this year, because Heritage is so much better, they're kind of unpredictable in the way that they've got 3 good wins, some of them lopsided over teams like Kent Lake or Fort Vancouver, but then they've gone on the road twice and it's not gone very well for the Timberwolves, including last week in their 3A Greater St. Helens League opener against Shelton, a team that was winless. So I think we're at this point with Heritage is we know they have the talent to win. It's going to be, I think, a very interesting question to see, can they put it together against teams like Prairie, against teams like Mountain View, and stack up a couple of league wins that'll make them a presence here as we go on into this home stretch of the season. Right,
yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about Heritage later in another category, but, I think that maybe the result against Shelton was just a little bit head-scratching, but, we haven't seen Shelton in person yet. They'll come down this week and play Evergreen, so, perhaps we're underrating them a little bit as well, but Heritage, 3 wins already is really impressive for them, and they face a winless Mountain View team this week, which should be an interesting test for both teams. So, it's really a great start for Heritage and a tough team to predict. Exactly.
All right. This next award that we're going to give, we're going to call the Geno Smith Award, because Geno Smith famously said, they wrote me off, but I didn't write back. Don't write these teams off because we think they are better than their record. I'm going to take the lead on this one because you just mentioned it. Mountain View, 0-5. They are better than 0-5, and they are getting better. They have 3 losses by 3 points or less. Their defense has only allowed 21 points a game, which is pretty low for a team that hasn't won. For me, with Mountain View, it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when they're going to put it together. And I think a lot of that has to do with finding a quarterback in Cashton Leakey that is really kind of taken on that role and found an offensive scheme with a lot of short passes and high percentage passes. You look at him the last 2 games, he's completing over 50% of his passes. Mountain View is not an 0-5 team, so don't write them off.
Absolutely. Yeah, those close losses, I mean, just some really tough results that, you would think just by the law of averages that they would have come out on top in a couple of those, and it's just been a couple tough games on that side, but they have the pieces in addition to kind of finding out their quarterback play. Obviously, Jaden Brown is one of the best running backs in our area, and they have a veteran team, with that offensive line and some really good playmakers on defense as well. And I think, maybe it took just a little bit longer for them too with a new coach and really largely a new group of coaches coming in too under Sean McDonald. So I think Mountain View is definitely better than that record suggests. And for my team, I'm going to take Hawkinson, also an 0-5 team, but they've already played Ridgefield and Woodland really close. Those are, I would say, pretty clear cut right now. The top 2 teams in the 2A GSHL, they lost to each of them by 3 points, including this most recent loss against Woodland that was won by Woodland on a late field goal. I think Hawkinson, much like last year, they were kind of a team that started slow out of the gate, and then they really kind of turned it around in the second half and pushed toward the playoffs. And I think they, even though the record isn't what they want right now, I think they have to take some confidence in how close they've been. And I think, to an extent, maybe the schedule does get just a tad bit easier for them coming up, which maybe allows them to turn things around. Their next 3 will be Columbia River, then they'll play Mark Morris, which should be a really interesting one. 2 teams that love to pass a lot, and then they will play Hudson's Bay after that. So Hawkinson at 0-5 still very much has a chance, and in the always top seed 2A GSHL. I can't count them out at this point, and I think they have shown some signs of progress these past few weeks.
Well, yeah, I mean, they have a strong pass. You look at some of the numbers Aiden Donowitz has put up that, those are, and the points they've been able to score against teams like Ridgefield and Woodland. We know Woodland's defense is good. And so if you just take that data on what they've been able to do on offense, it does not translate to an 0-5 record, but just sometimes that's how the breaks go. So definitely for Mountain View and Woodland, don't write them off, Mountain View and Hawkinson, don't write them off based on their record at this point of the season. All right, we got 3 more to go, and they're kind of the ones that the ones that you'd figure we would do with midseason Coach of the Year, midseason Defensive MVP, and midseason Offensive MVP. We'll start with midseason Coach of the Year, and Will, you said we were going to talk a little bit more about Heritage and some of the improvements they've had. Why is your pick for midseason Coach of the Year the one you settled on?
Yeah, it's Kevin Peterson of Heritage. I think it's, I mean, to win 3 games after they were, the kind of talk going into the season was just end the streak, which would be to get 1. They've gotten 3 already through the first 5 weeks, and I think some really convincing wins at that. And I think also, for a team that last year when Kevin Peterson stepped in as a first-year head coach, that was their 3rd head coach in 3 seasons. I think we're seeing really the power this year of just what continuity and having a coach who wants to stick around for a long time does for a program. And I think the Timberwolves are in a great spot now, and no matter how the rest of the season plays out, I think now Peterson and this coaching staff have a tangible thing kind of to take with them going forward. And I mean, I think when you have a season like this, that's kind of when more interest is generated often in a school and in a program. Hopefully it'll lead to higher participation numbers, and I think that as much as anything is a really powerful thing, and it's a credit to Kevin Peterson and his staff for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole vibe around Heritage has changed in the last few years. Goes from like, you can kind of tough times, they don't last, but they seem to certainly be dragging on to now there's definitely clear skies around the Heritage football program. Yeah. This was a tough decision for me. I think a lot of really impressive coaching performances the first half of this year. You could look at, say, Dale Rule at Kingsway. They were 2-7 last year. They're 2-2 this year. They've had a breakout performance by Ryan Charlton, who is racking up some really impressive offensive numbers. They were close against Kalama, I think only losing by 10 points. Dale Rule has really kind of taken that program and got it moving in a great direction. You look at what Scott Rice has done at Ridgefield, new quarterback, having, they lost their kind of do everything, grind it out running back to graduation in Rocco Wright. They've had to replace that. And all that Ridgefield has done is start the year 5-0 and in great position to contend for a 2A Greater St. Helens League title. You talk about Christian Swain at Evergreen and the great things they got going there. I mean, Evergreen, it's one thing that I always notice is the ability of a coach to take a good athlete and make that good athlete into a good football player. And Christian Swain has done that time and time again. You look at Fox Crater, who was a basketball player. Now, he's at Oregon. You look at Ziel Griffin, who is playing D1 at Eastern Michigan. You look at some of the D1 recruits that they have all over the field. Josiah Lannis going to committed to Boise State. Terrence Sarion, who you talked about. What Christian Swain has done at Evergreen to be in position to contend for that 3A Greater St. Helens League title and have a whole stable of talented players to do so, I think really speaks volume to what he's done this season at Evergreen. But my choice for midseason coach of the year, and maybe it's no surprise, I got to go with Adam Matheson at Camas. Camas has done everything that even the most optimistic projections said that they would. They're 5-0. They've won those games. They've been tested a few times, maybe by Roosevelt. They've gone on the road and won. They have another road trip this week up to Monroe. And you say, well, but Camas has pieces all over the field that are really impressive. Well, it's still a coaching staff's job to put those pieces together and make sure they function as a unit. And that has certainly been the case at Camas. You have a high-powered offense with Jake Davidson at quarterback, throwing to receivers like Chase McGee. And you got that defense that is averaging just, I think, a little over 12 points a game allowed. Certainly, it's no surprise that Adam Matheson's staff is having success at Camas, but still the level of success they've had for the first half of the year has been nothing short of impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty seamless transition, not really, something that's been talked about enough. And I mean, it's not a surprise. Obviously, Matheson is a very accomplished coach and spent last year in kind of an advisory role on that offense and what was then Jack Hathaway's coaching staff. But yeah, I mean, obviously the true test will come when we get to the postseason where, Camas has fallen a little bit short in years past, but I think Matheson has done, just about everything he can so far. And it's, I think it's a credit to, just a coach kind of, melding kind of his system with the personnel he has. And it's been a really perfect match so far. And I think, and he's a great offensive coach. Obviously, I think he's worked wonders, even, getting Jake Davidson, their quarterback, to another level, and Chase McGee as well. So, a very strong choice for midseason coach of the year as well.
All right. We're going to go next to our midseason defensive MVP. And again, another just hard choice to make. There's a lot of players that have really emerged on the defensive side of the ball. You look at someone at Evergreen like Jakai Clardy, a defensive back with multiple D1 offers, made the game-clinching interception against Kelso this last week. You look at a game wrecker like Luke Webb, someone who, when he's rushing off the edge, it literally is making the other teams dictate their offense and run away from him. So he's someone that's influenced the game, even if he's not making sacks to the level that maybe he would if they would run towards him. But I'm going to go with a player we just mentioned that I saw firsthand this last week, and that's Micah Miller at Evergreen. You talk about just the heartbeat of that defense. Micah Miller is, he's one of these linebackers. He's bigger, he's faster than most linebackers you see at the high school level, and he just brings the intensity. Evergreen has a luxury where they have a roster that's big enough to where you don't have to play everybody two ways, so Micah Miller plays on defense only. But when Evergreen is on offense, you think that he would be sitting down or standing and watching everything. No, he's pacing side by side, just intense, can't wait to get back on the field. And when he's on the field, he is just the eye of that storm that is the Evergreen Plainsman defense, a defensive unit that has, ways that they can take over a game, and that has really been the theme for what they've been able to do well this year.
For sure, yeah. I mean, the story's been their defense, and Miller is really one of their leaders. I think it's fair to say, and really a true athlete as well. Somebody who's taken up the sport of rugby recently, in addition to being a good wrestler as well. And really fun player to watch, and a really special leader for the Plainsmen. I'm going a little bit off script here. I'm going with Elijah Franco of Washougal. Plays primarily at safety. He was their leading tackler last year, and all he's done so far through 5 games is get 6 interceptions, including 1 return for a touchdown, 7 tackles for loss. He's averaging 14 tackles per game to lead the team. And although Washougal has been a little bit up and down through 5 games, their defense is only allowing 12 points per game. So still in a really good spot. And Elijah Franco, as a senior, has really been, just one of the leaders of that defense, and somebody who has kept, when their offense has struggled, their defense has allowed them to stay in these games.
All right. Well, that leaves us to our final award, the offensive MVP for the first half of the 2024 season. And Will, you're going with someone that just put up some insane numbers at quarterback this year.
Yeah, it's Colton Gesser at Seton Catholic, the junior quarterback who's in his second year as a full-time starter, although he's played all 3 years at the varsity level. He leads the area with 22 touchdowns, one of only 4 quarterbacks to be over 1,000 yards passing. And that offense is just humming right now. I mean, they've averaged just under 50 points per game through 5 games. None of these games have been particularly close, and the schedule will toughen up a little bit. They get a big test this week with Kalama, but it just seems like an offense right now that's firing on all cylinders, and it's a credit to Gesser and a great group of receivers they have. It seemed like last year there were times where their passing game did sputter a little bit, and they were kind of able to lean on their great running back and Jacob Williams, but it seems like right now it's really going great for them on all cylinders, and Gesser is really obviously the orchestrator behind that.
I think the sort of vibe we had when watching Seton last year is, okay, this young kid at quarterback is good, but wait till he arrives. Right. I think it's fair to say Colton Gesser has arrived
for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, another tough choice since to my offensive MVP. You can certainly look at the numbers that Jake Davidson has put up at Camas, and certainly those are very impressive. You could look at, Aiden Mintanya, who leads the area in rushing with almost over 1,000 yards for Kelso, and he 14 touchdowns. He did this last year. He's doing it again. So no surprise that Aiden Mintanya is one of those guys that is really making his team hum. But you look at Jake Davidson and his 1,300 passing yards and 20 passing touchdowns. Many of those have gone to this one receiver that is my pick for the first half offensive MVP, and that is Chase McGee at Camas. He leads the area with 30 catches, also has 575 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. He has been the one reliable weapon among many at Camas that has made that offense hum.
Yeah, and I mean, remember last year, Trenton Swanson was really a big part of that receiving game, and it's kind of complementary pieces around him. But Chase McGee has really stepped in to that number 1 role. And looking at some of those numbers, I was surprised to even see that, because they're a team obviously that kind of likes to play a little bit more balanced. But for him to already put up those numbers through 5 weeks is really impressive, and I think he's definitely one of the best receivers in our area, and he's proved it. And in addition to pole vaulting, of course.
Oh yeah, one of the best, and a great fisherman. I think Meg Wachnick was telling me an anecdote that he, out of pole vaulting, football, and bass fishing might be his best.
Interesting.
So but I think one of the reasons, and you touched on it, was a player like that is so important in Camus's scheme is that they succeed by not being one-dimensional. Maybe he's been the guy that has been the benefactor of defenses kind of keying in on some other areas, but what happens if you start keying in on Chase McGee? It opens so much up for their running game, for their other receivers, and in that scheme. And so to have a weapon emerge like that, just I think is central to the storyline of Camus being currently the number 1 ranked team in Class 4A.
Right, and bodes really well for them going forward as well.
Yes. All right. Well, that's the first half of the season in the books. But the second half is going to be even better. We're going to have league title chases. We're going to have MVPs emerge, and we're going to have playoff positioning happen. We can't wait to see how these next 4 weeks of the regular season evolve, and we can't wait for the playoffs, which, as we all know, are going to be here before we know it. Be sure to tune in every week to catch up on the latest and what's going on in high school sports in Southwest Washington. Be sure to tune in to our social media channels at 360 Preps, and we will see you on the field.